The Sederant for this meeting of the Equal Opportunities Forum held on the 14th of June 2023. I can see that we have present today Councillors Kalikis, Clark, Corbett and Ferguson. I have apologies from Councillor McAdams. Also present today is Councillor McGeever. I have apologies from Councillors Razak and Robb. Councillor Thompson? No, I don't see you there. Also in attendance today are a number of officers, as well as Jennifer Hamilton, Modern Studies teacher at Straven Academy, and Isabella Rayburn and Lewis Devlin, some S1 pupils. So with that, I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much for that. Can I begin just by passing on our regular chair's apologies to members and our guests for not being able to make it today. He's been unavoidably held up making a speech that's overrun, so I'll step into the breach and apologies for any nonsense I got up to in the chair. Right, so with that, can I ask for a declaration of interest, item 1 in the agenda. If anyone has any, please let us know now. Not seeing any. Move on to minutes of previous meeting, pages 3 through 6 in your document pack. Can I move that these are an accurate record? Thanks very much, Ross. And with that, I'll move on to item number 3, which is the Straven Learning Communities Thriving Together Anti-Racism Education Project. And just to extend a welcome on behalf of the whole committee, most of whom you can't see at the moment because they're dialing in. So to Jennifer Hamilton, the Modern Studies teacher from Straven Academy, and to S1 pupils Bella Rayburn and Lewis Devlin. Thank you very much for coming along, guys, and over to you.
Hi there. If I can just start by explaining the origins of the project that we undertook, and then I'll pass over to Lewis and Bella and they'll tell you a wee bit about their experiences of it. So over the last year or so, we had actually encountered an increased number of race-related incidents at Straven Academy. So this had prompted us to act on that and try and address it and decrease those for future years. I certainly firmly believe that the vast majority of incidents that we were dealing with weren't coming from a place of malicious intent. It was really, it stems from ignorance in terms of race from the young people. Therefore, our aim really within the project was to educate young people on just a better understanding of the variety of races that exist within British society. Tackling that all at once is obviously an impossible task. So I'll speak to you about it in the phases of the project. So Bella and Lewis are really here to speak about phase 1 of the project. That's the only phase that has been undertaken so far, but I'll tell you our aims for the other ones. Now, phase 1, we decided to focus on our largest minority group. It is our largest minority group, both within Straven Academy and South Lanarkshire as a whole. So we have 25,008 secondary school pupils in South Lanarkshire. 493 of those belong to the Asian Pakistani minority group. Obviously, that's not a huge number, and that is from our largest minority group. So really identifies to us that we're not a racially diverse local authority, certainly in comparison to some other authorities. And to me, that made this an even more important project because our role in schools is to prepare young people for life outside of school, and to not have an understanding of racially diverse society really doesn't prepare them very well for that then. So phase 1 of the project, we wanted to do something to increase the understanding of the Asian Pakistani minority within that. We didn't have any money to do this, so that obviously becomes an issue. So our fabulous librarian actually applied for funding through the Scottish Library Improvement Fund and managed to obtain a grant there. So using that, we decided to make it a literacy-based project as well. So she also found our text that we used. It's a text called Planet Omar, and it focuses on the life of a young British boy of Asian Pakistani descent or heritage, and he's transitioning from one school to another. His parents are moving as part of their job. So we thought this was really a good place to start because we were going to engage our entire learning community in this. So we decided to focus on the primary 7 pupils So our 6 feeder primaries all read the text in the primary schools and had discussions around the text in the primary school. And then those pupils came up to Straven Academy for the day, where we engaged in a series of workshops, looked at tackling race discrimination, looking at a better understanding of the Asian Pakistani group. So in the lead up to that, I piloted the project, I read the text and carried out the workshops with one of my S1 classes, so Bella and Lewis are part of that. Really, the primary focus of this was, as well as an increased understanding of that minority group, that actually the pupils just felt better placed to speak about issues about race, to ask questions about race, rather than shying away from those concepts and fear that they're going to offend somebody, or that was ultimately our aim in that. Going forward, those primary 7 pupils, obviously come August, will be our new S1 cohort, and we plan to do something with them. That's still very much a work in progress. We might try and engage David Livingston, or show racism the red card, something along those lines. And then phase 3 of the project is going to look very much like phase 1. But this time we are either going to focus on a different minority group or a different protected characteristic. We're thinking possibly of looking at disability. But again, we'll do it through literacy. We'll pick a relevant text. The primary schools are going to have much greater involvement this time, and they're going to select a text that they'll again read with the P7 cohort, and they'll come up to the academy and we'll carry out a series of workshops. So I will pass you over to Lewis. First of all, Lewis is going to tell you a wee bit about his experiences of Planet Omar, how he felt about the book, how he felt about the workshops, and what he got from that. Okay.
Hello, my name is Lewis and I'm a second year pupil at Straven Academy. Recently in our history classes, we have been reading a book called Planet Omar. It is a book about a young Muslim boy called Omar who must adapt to new school, make friends and face bullies. Not only did I really enjoy the book, but it also taught me about Muslim culture and the hardships that children with different religions must endure every day. I personally enjoyed learning about Ramadan. It was actually Ramadan when we started the book, and all the rules you must follow. For example, you cannot eat or drink unless it's before sunrise, iftar, or after sunrise, fetor. In the book, Omar tried to fast, but it was too hard, so his dad told him that kids, the elderly, and pregnant women don't have to fast. I found it really funny when Omar said that if he didn't fast, then he wouldn't get enough points from Allah to get a Lamborghini. My favourite thing I learned about Ramadan is that you have a big feast at the end to celebrate, and that sounds amazing. While the book is quite light-hearted, it still touches on some very important topics. When Omar first moves in, he has a mean old neighbour who doesn't like Omar and his family and would call them the Muslims. But throughout the book, Omar and his family would teach her about their way of life, and at the end of the book, she joins them for the feast at the end of Ramadan. Even though she still calls them the Muslims, she doesn't mean it in a harmful or negative way, and Omar's family don't find it offensive. This is also the case for the school bully Daniel, who would bully Omar and even went as far as telling him to get out of the country. But as he learned about their way of life, he soon realised that what he was saying was wrong and apologised to Omar. Personally, I think this is an amazing book and that it really opened my eyes to the cultures around me. No child should ever have to go through any sort of discrimination, and I believe that if we can educate everyone on other ways of life, then racism wouldn't exist, and the world would be a much better and friendlier place. Thank you for listening to my thoughts, and I hope this has made you think about how others feel through our actions, and that we can all live happily.
I really enjoyed reading Planet Omar because it explained a lot more about Islamic cultures and festivals like Eid and Ramadan. As well as teaching us about Islamic culture, it also gave off the message of kindness, like how Omar's family, even after facing discrimination from their next door neighbour, they treated her like a friend and didn't turn sour, and eventually she learnt from her mistakes and learned to like Omar's family. Also how Omar had been bullied for months by Daniel about his ethnicity, and in times of trouble, when Omar could have just walked away, he helped Daniel and after a while became friends, as Daniel learnt that there wasn't anything wrong about being Muslim. As well as the book, the workshops were really great too. They helped us ask more questions about race in a fun and light-hearted way. Although at the time we were all feeling out of our comfort zone trying to talk about race, in the end we all felt like we could talk and understand racial differences in a more relaxed way. Thank you.
That's okay, we can deal with it. Thank you very much. Cheers for that. That was absolutely fantastic. Before I say anything, I'll just open it up to colleagues. If anyone else would like to speak, please indicate that you want to do so now. Thanks. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. Thank you to both Lewis and Bella. I've got the names right, haven't I? And can be terrible at names sometimes. I'm better with faces, but just thank you. You both spoke very well, better than some councillors I've seen and sometimes myself. So very thank you for that. It's really informative of what you guys have done and are doing to tackle racism in your school community. I've got a couple questions. What kind of barriers have you encountered in this project? Have you had any pushback from other pupils or staff, or has it kind of been smooth in that and everyone's happy to engage and accept the project? And as well, have you been able to take much input or feedback from people with lived experience throughout the project, people from those backgrounds? Have you had much chance to do that? And my other question, I suppose it's this one might be able to be answered by any officers that are here. Straven Academy seem to be leading the way in a lot of these things. The anti-racism work, the climate work. They were presenting awards at the Education Awards recently. So what kind of things are we doing to promote these sort of things in other learning communities and other high schools? Just if you're able to answer any of those, that would be great. But thank you again for coming and speaking to us. It's really good to hear from you.
Hi there, I'm Karen Riley, one of the inclusion officers, and I've got equalities on my remit. So this year we feel that we've started the journey of trying to embed race equality and anti-racist education across South Lanarkshire as a whole. So in the report, you'll see that we had a presentation to all head teachers just before the Easter holidays from Hakeem Din, who was previously an Inspector for Education Scotland and now works as a consultant for the Scottish Government on their race equality and anti-racist education programme. So he is acting as a bit of a consultant for us as we start off our own journey. So we have a small working group just now looking at two areas. One is refreshing our guidance on the reporting and recording and management of racist incidents. So we've identified there's a bit of a gap in our system, and that we're maybe not getting all the data that we need to be as effective as possible. And the other area is in terms of the curriculum. So there are lots of resources now for schools really to look. You might have heard the phrase decolonise the curriculum. So that is something that we're looking at in terms of all our schools to provide advice and guidance on making sure that the curriculum represents the diversity of the young people that we have, and making sure that it covers a range of perspectives. So we've started that journey this year, and we're hoping to produce the guidance on racist incidents and curriculum guidance during the next session.
Jennifer, I think you wanted to come in again there, didn't you?
Yeah, just you were talking about barriers. Actually, it was very plain sailing. We didn't have, so I know that from a meeting we had, Karen was talking about Hakeem Din, we had a meeting yesterday with some other primary and secondary heads, and they were saying that often they find that parents become a huge barrier to that. We haven't received any of that. Quite the opposite, because I contacted one of our parents who is a member of the Parent Council, who is parent of one of our ethnic minority groups, specifically the Asian Pakistani. My knowledge of, I'm not an RMPS teacher, my knowledge of Islam is limited, and I wanted to take her through the workshops before I went ahead and carried them out to make sure that actually the aims that I'm trying to achieve in this do reflect the experiences of the young people within those minority groups, and she was really supportive and really helpful in that. So kind of both things you were saying there, no barriers, actually quite the opposite. Parents being really helpful and supportive and helping to check that the experiences that we think that minority people might have were actually the case, or actually informed us of other things that were helpful in those workshops too. Okay.
Thanks very much for that. I've got a request to come in from Councillor Kalikis. Janine, would you like to speak?
I've got two things I'd like to raise. The first one is operational, and I apologise. I raised this at a meeting only a couple of weeks ago. I do appreciate we've got visitors in today, so when our visitors from Straven Academy are speaking, I understand why it's coming up seat 14 and so on. But we've also got officers in the meeting today, and it's not, the names aren't coming up. It just makes the meeting a bit less accessible for Councillor Ferguson, and I have raised that before. So with that out of the way, can I thank the learners that have come in to speak to us today. The question that I had wanted to raise was going back to talking about decolonising the curriculum. I was wondering, we've got several minority groups represented today in the papers. Is it part of the curriculum? Are we talking about intersectionality when we're talking about decolonising? So are we looking at that across the board? Are we seeing how racism impacts on LGBT plus people's lives? Are we talking about how racism is is the nub of a lot of discrimination in terms of disability discrimination and stuff like that? Just wondered if we could get a wee bit of feedback about how these things are all being taught in the round, if that makes sense.
So we're at obviously the start of the journey, and there are a lot of resources out there that we would use. So in terms of racism, obviously within South Lanarkshire we have the David Livingstone Centre that many people visited ourselves when we were younger, and that work alongside our schools. So they have recently revised all their materials to make sure that they are presenting a different perspective. So in terms of someone from the UK going to Africa and not recognising the civilisation and the culture that was there. And so they have revised the resources. So that's the sort of thing we'll be doing, looking at revising resources as well. But to the other part of your question, I was this morning, I was in Hamilton Grammar, and they have set up Equality Ambassadors, a pupil group, and we went over the Equality Act and all the protected characteristics. And so the pupils there was a range of age groups from S1 to S6. So they're very keen to take forward that sort of work and looking at how they can overcome any discrimination or barriers that people of all the protected characteristics face. So there'll be different strands to the work. There'll be the work of the curriculum in terms of history and modern studies, but there's also pupils themselves. So that's within one secondary, and there are two primaries who have equality and diversity ambassadors that I'm going out to visit in the new term. And they're very keen in taking forward that work that you've suggested in terms of looking at racism, disability, LGBTQ pupils, and how are we catering and making sure that everybody feels welcome in our schools.
Janine, would you like to come back in there?
Up on that last piece, I'm lucky enough to be a parent, a Calderwood primary parent, and they are one of the primaries that have got diversity ambassadors, and the work that they're doing in that school on all types of equalities is just fantastic, and I'd love to see it rolled out across the whole county. It just would be fantastic. So thanks for that answer.
Thanks very much, Janine. And if I can just say as well, thank you for your first point. We are experiencing some technical issues. You might notice the camera tracking's a bit slow as well, which is why it's just cut to me there. But so yeah, to Councillor Ferguson, I can only apologise for the names not all appearing on screen, and it's something we'll try and rectify. So sorry about that. It is beyond our control at the moment. I would like to bring in Councillor Poppy Corbett.
To know that I'm not going to be asking any questions. I just wanted to thank Lewis and Bella for coming in today, and just to say they were both extremely articulate and an absolute credit to the school. So thank you very much. That was really good to hear from them. Thank you.
Thanks, Poppy. Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I thought you were absolutely fantastic, and as Councillor Clark said, made a lot more sense than most of us councillors usually do. So thank you for that. I thought as well, I do agree with you right at the start, Jennifer. You'd said you'd spoken about how there'd been an increase in incidents, and you thought it was due to kind of a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding, rather than kind of sinister intent. And I agree that is quite often the case. Probably the majority of incidents that affect people are through that. It's a lack of awareness and kind of unconscious bias, everyday racism. And I think in some ways that can affect people probably more through the course of their life than the kind of more overt sinister nastiness. So I think projects like this are absolutely fantastic if they do raise awareness and understanding amongst the majority community of what it's like to experience life from a minority perspective. And also, I suppose we have to say as well, and Janine touched upon this, that because a person has one characteristic doesn't mean they're not affected by other protected characteristics as well. So I think it would be useful for majority and minority pupils and persons across South Lanarkshire alike to be more aware of the experiences of others. So thanks very much for doing that project and for coming in and telling us about it, because I do truly find it interesting, and I hope it will be the beginning of something that goes much further and much wider and much deeper in the months and years to come. So with that, I'll just say on behalf of the whole committee, thank you very much to you, all three of you, for coming in and giving us your time and efforts today. It is hugely appreciated, and I think with that we'll say you're free to escape rather than sit through the rest of our agenda. I know you've got a taxi waiting to get you back to Straven, so thank you very much. Okay, members, I'm just going to move on now to item 4 on the agenda. This is pages 7 through 18 of your packs. It's the annual report on mainstreaming equalities and diversity, brought to us from Education Resources, and I'll invite Karen Riley to speak to that report. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. I would just like to pick out a couple of highlights from the report and then welcome any questions that you have from it. So we have the anti-racist education underway, which we're starting this year and hoping to have embedded within all our establishments. Another highlight for us is the ongoing work supporting children and young people with disability and autism. We have some ASN additional support needs schools which are really quite advanced in terms of how they use AAC, or alternative and augmentative communication, and that covers everything from the use of Makatons, picture exchange, symbols, up to certain types of apps and specialist pieces of equipment. And that's an ongoing focus for us to make sure that we're removing the communication barriers for all our children, and that all our young people have the chance to participate and give their views and be fully included within the school environment. So we have a project going on focused on gaining the views of a range of pupils, some of whom don't have verbal communication but are using other methods to make sure their views are taken into account. And we also gave some additional funding this year to all our bases to purchase sensory and therapeutic curriculum resources for the young people to make sure that all their needs are met within the school establishment. We had a good practice event that was held within Sanderson High School, attended by a number of our schools and establishments to share good practice, to network, and to make sure that the expertise that we have within the education system has been moved around and shared out. And we're hoping to develop that next year and invite more colleagues from mainstream schools. We also had one of my colleagues, Anne Reid, carried out a bit of work on the accessibility strategy, which all local authorities are required to have, and that's us constantly reviewing and revising our policies and procedures and making sure that our establishments are accessible, not just in terms of physically accessible, but also through the curriculum and through the use of technology that's out there, and that we're using all the tools that are available on Chromebooks, iPads, desktop, etc., to remove barriers to children's education. And next year, we're going to continue on with the anti-racist education work. As I said, Hamilton Grammar, Canberra Primary and Calderwood Primary have pupil groups of diversity, inclusion and diversity ambassadors in place. And they're doing some really, really good work. So from Straven Academy, the digital communication team have made a short film about the work at Straven Academy, and from the transition event they held on the 16th of May with the primary schools in the learning community going up to the high school, and that'll be available to view soon, and hopefully we'll be able to put it out in the corporate Twitter event. And I think next year with the schools that are piloting the diversity ambassadors, the pupil groups, it'd be useful to make a short film of them we'll hear directly from pupils, because I've been out at Hamilton Grammar this morning, really the pupils' voice and their ideas and their understanding of maybe prejudice and discrimination that exists within a school that teachers don't always see was really powerful. It was really good to hear, and they've got some really, really good ideas, the pupils themselves, about how they want to take that work forward. So we'll be continuing to support that. So I welcome any questions that anyone has about equalities within education.
Thanks very much, Karen. Thanks very much for that. I'll just ask any members who maybe want to speak on it to indicate now. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that report. I would welcome a lot of it. It's really good to see that we are doing more work in promoting diversity and inclusion within our school, especially considering how important it is. I just think it's good that you've explained some other stuff in what you've said there. I think in the report, in some parts, it maybe could expand on or provide more detail on things. I think considering the national picture, just reading from the LGBT Youth Scotland Life in Scotland Education report, you've got only 10% of participants rate the experience of school as good. 6-7% of participants report experiencing homophobic, biphobic or transphobic bullying during their time in school, and 13% have left education as a result of homophobia, biphobia or transphobia, and that's increased since 2017. Much of the other statistics have had a dramatic increase or decrease to the negative since around about 2017. I know it's a wide range of factors, but definitely some worrying statistics there. So I feel like we can maybe take a wider approach to some of this. And more specifically, I know it mentions the school, LGBT Youth School Charter, and there's a lot of good work going on there. I'm glad we're trying to promote it within our schools. But do we intend on supporting any of our schools to go for the gold standard of it, which I believe specifically focuses on or includes a focus on supporting transgender pupils? I feel like in a lot of these strategies, transgender pupils or transgender people can kind of be left behind. They're absolutely part of the LGBT family, and there's no LGBT without the T, but there's separate issues for all the communities within the wider community, including transgender people. So in the future, I'd probably like more of a focus or detail on what we're doing specifically to support transgender pupils, and including, embedding more LGBT education in the curriculum. I know it mentions about working with TAI, but I hope we can expand that work, or if we're able to provide more information about how we've tried to embed that into the curriculum, because the statistics here of showing that the people who have LGBT education in the curriculum, have a lot more positive outcomes when these kind of issues are talked about. Just looking at the rest of my points, and it mentions later in the report about recording bullying on the CMIS system. And how detailed is that going to be in terms of recording the specific nature of these incidents? Are we going to be able to keep a better track of, homophobic bullying or incidents or transphobic incidents or bullying? I think it's important that we've got these very good national statistics, but it'll be useful to have a better picture of what's happening in South Lanarkshire. Are we ahead, behind of the curve? What areas do we need to focus on? Because obviously it's a very important issue that's not been. We've not had evidence to show that it's getting better, even though we are maybe doing more stuff. So I know I've spoken for a wee bit there, so I'm happy to come back in on and clarify anything. But if answer to the best you can just now, thanks.
Thanks for that,
Yep.
Ross. Karen?
Thanks for that. So in response to the report you've described, which was taking responses from LGBT pupils within school and their experiences, which, as you've expressed, too many pupils are having a negative experience. So our response was to contact TIE, which is Time for Inclusive Education, and that's a charity really set up by the Scottish Government to promote LGBT inclusive education within schools. So I've arranged for them to come here on the 28th of September, and they're going to do a showcase event, an introductory event, and I've sent out this morning an invitation to every school. So every school within the council will be able to send a member of staff. So that's our first stage in kind of getting that introduction, setting the scene, making people aware of what resources are out there. TIE have online training modules that teachers can complete, and they can also come out to individual schools and do a bit of work with them as well. But the first stage is to make sure every school will have the opportunity to come and to hear that showcase and to take away resources and start thinking about how they improve the representation within the curriculum for this group of pupils. We also have, so in terms of bullying incidents just now are recorded on CMIS on the Bullying Inequalities module. That does have a facility to record prejudice-based bullying. So there's a drop-down menu with the 9 protected characteristics of the Equalities Act. So schools can record under that. And one of the tasks I'll have over the summer is to sit and look at the information that we have centrally and how much data I can pull from that about bullying incidents within our schools, whether they're increasing or decreasing, and whether they're related to a protected characteristic. There's some work nationally has just been done on bullying within schools, which did find a few gaps. The CMIS module has been in existence since about 2019, so just before COVID it was introduced, and then with the school closure, obviously everything being overtaken, its use across schools isn't as rigorous as it should be. So we've promoted that to schools this year, that we expect it all to be recorded on there so we can centrally track and monitor. From the national report that was carried out, I think the general feedback is it's not fantastic for recording. It's a bit clunky. It could be more user friendly. So the Scottish Government will be pulling a group together to revise it nationally. But I've also been in touch this week with Respect Me. So they're the National Anti-Bullying charity within Scotland. So they are also going to do some work for us following on in the new term. They'll be delivering a session to schools. It'll be the one session, but we've got 3 separate dates in, so as many schools as possible can attend, and that will be looking at anti-bullying policy and making sure your policies are robust and refreshed and updated, and they will also cover the recording and reporting of incidents and impress on schools how important that is so that we can have a consistent approach. And we're going to ask the 3 sessions, we've got 3 schools, we're going to ask them to attend and just share some good practice with us. So we have Stonelaw High School, which was recently inspected and got a fantastic inspection report, grades 5 and 6, which are quite unusual, they're very hard to achieve, and their approach towards bullying and their anti-bullying work was highlighted in that. James Ayton Primary as well are very strong in that area, and again Hamilton Grammar, who have really strong anti-bullying work, and they have a lot of work round about their PSE programme on embedding inclusive attitudes within the school. So we'll have Respect Me in to look at bullying and advise schools in particular, and they'll cover the prejudice-based bullying and the characteristics LGBT bullying and what we can do about it, as well as having the education showcase, which all schools will be invited to. With regards to the Charter and the Gold Award, I think my understanding of it is it takes about 18 months to 2 years to go through each stage. So we have a number of schools who have achieved a Bronze Award. So it may be 2 or 3 years before they then achieve the gold. But all the schools who are currently on the programme will be able to take it forward to that level.
Yeah, thanks very much. Come back in there if you like. Ross?
And thank you for that detailed answer. It's very useful information to know. I don't understand that about the Charter now. I just think we could be possibly doing more outside of that. We don't necessarily need the Charter to be able to promote these, education within the LGBT education within the curriculum and training amongst staff and making sure. I know you've mentioned, a lot of times it's maybe one staff that goes on representing everyone, and we need to make sure that's being filtered down throughout the whole staff and it's for the whole school. And it seems to be a lot of the times where a few schools are leading, not necessarily above the rest, but they've been kind of in the spotlight a bit, and we need to make sure it's a standardised thing rather than it relying on a few schools as well. And just to repeat the point that it'd be useful to see some more focus and detail on specifically supporting transgender pupils who face many of the same but also different challenges. So it'll be glad to know if that's me finished for now.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clark. And no, you make good points, and they're taken on board, I'm sure. And like you, I would like to see some of that information come out as well. So thanks. Janine, do you want to come in? Janine Kalikas.
The first thing I wanted to say was I understand Cathkin High have reached their silver since the report must be since the report was published. So Cathkin High in our area is now a silver on the Charter. I'm sure Karen can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm sure that's right. I think it's wonderful that we're doing this work. As Ross has kind of highlighted, there is a massive issue for trans people worldwide at the moment. It's not a new issue. It's not a new thing, but it's a new issue in our schools insofar as younger trans people are now coming out and speaking their truth at a much earlier stage in the process. So I think encouraging schools to work towards that gold standard where the staff are feeling much more confident about how to support trans learners is vital. And again, when we're looking at bullying, we're kind of working back on ourselves, and it's about getting that embedded as we move, as children are coming into schools. I'd like to know a little bit about, if it's possible, what we're doing to support our transgender children where they're coming out maybe at school. Do they know how to report that, how to access somebody within the school? If home life isn't supportive of them, how are they then supported at school? I'd like to hear a wee bit about that and what we're doing to kind of support our transgender children. I also had a couple of questions about autistic children as well, and neurodiverse learners. There seems to be loads of great work going on there in terms of sort of sensory input, learning supports, Makaton, laptops, all the rest of it. I'm wondering about just really simple, basic things like brain breaks, being able to just go to a quiet place when they need to, being almost permissive if children have things like echolalia where they can't help speaking out in the class. You hear a lot about children with neurodiversities getting into trouble or not being quite handled in the way that. So just a wee bit about that as well, please. And again, sorry for waffling on like Councillor Clark, what we like. Sorry.
No problem at all. Delighted to hear from you, Janine, always. If we can go to Karen for a response on some of that.
Yeah, so in terms of transgender pupils. Like any pupil, they have a named person within the school. So at primary school, it's the head teacher, and at secondary, it would be their pupil support teacher in the first instance. So obviously and like I said today, I was in Hamilton Grammar, they have a pupil equality ambassadors, and they have their equality group, and a lot of our schools have LGBT groups now, or clubs at lunchtime, where pupils can go and it's a safe space for them, and they can talk and they can chat in that environment, and they can be signposted to various supports that are out there. There are also support groups that are run by our YCFL service, our youth work service, so they have LGBT support groups for different age groups of pupils that schools can refer to that take place maybe just after school. We also have access now, all schools have access to school counselling. So if there's a child who's feeling particularly distressed or confused or really not sure what to do or how to proceed, then they'll be able to access a counsellor through their school. And one of the areas of counselling that's been developed is self-referral, so that pupils over 12 should be able to refer themselves to a counsellor. They don't necessarily need the schools to do that. So that's something that's been expanded just now, and that was something the Scottish Government were very keen on, and it was part of the contract. This counselling providers, when they bid for the contract, they could offer a self-referral service. So in some schools it might be a poster with a QR code that a pupil's able to scan, and that would take them and they can refer themselves to a counsellor as well. And we're also looking at ways that that can be expanded during the school holidays. And there are other projects coming online. So there's a project happening with Sam H, which is called Let's Connect, and that's going to be not just for trans pupils, but for any pupil who's finding school difficult or life difficult. So there'll be additional support in terms of training older pupils, to support younger ones, support workshops for staff and workshop for parents as well. We have also had LGBT Youth Scotland in delivering training to some of our schools and our educational psychologists as well. So again, that more staff are in a better position to support. In terms of our children with autism and neurodiversity, it should be standard practice within a classroom within all schools, mainstream or ASN schools, that children have an additional support plan, an individual plan with the strategies that are going to help them learn their best. So all of our schools, I would think, have a safe space or sensory space in some form or another. In some schools, that's an area at the back of each classroom. In others, it may be an individual room or a couple of rooms within the school. And children should be able to leave the class ideally before they feel overwhelmed, and that should be part of their plan. They should either be able to do it through, depending on their communication level, if they're not able to ask verbally, then they can have a symbol on the desk. Sometimes it's as simple as red, amber, green, and if a child turns the red card over, then the teacher knows that that's the time they need a break. In terms of movement breaks, we have very good links with our speech and language service and occupational therapy service. So they attend a lot of meetings within schools as well, and it's something they would suggest, or it's something that teachers are experienced now at trying to build in during the day. And school has changed, so for the younger children in particular, P1 and 2, they're not sitting at a desk all day, their learning is much more active. But we certainly have pupils where they would not be asked to sit for long periods of time, and that schools can build in a way of movement. Now, they can be quite creative about it. It can be in some pupils, their job is to collect the recycling paper, say, from each classroom. And if they do that every day in the afternoon, it means they're getting that break and they're going round, they're doing something purposeful, they're collecting something for the school. There's a lot of movement involved in it. So schools are quite creative at building those opportunities in during the day. In terms of echolalia, we've got quite a number of pupils who may shout out or repeat something that people said, and they shouldn't be getting into trouble or any consequence for that. It's part of their learning profile, so that should be recognised through the planning work. It should be written down in the additional support plan so that all staff know and all staff are aware of that. We have pupils who have maybe a sensory box, so if they're feeling stressed in class, they have a few favourite items, whether that's some children like putty, some children like the slime, something noisy, something that's particular to them that they can use when they're feeling a bit stressed. We have schools who have brought in little tents. Sometimes they're dark inside, sometimes they're kind of normal, and it's a space that a child can go into when they're overwhelmed, and it's their own particular area, they can go in there just if they need to bring themselves down or they're feeling a bit dysregulated. So we've lots and lots of strategies like that that should be in place in all schools as a matter of course, and the teachers should be used to planning for. And if there's anything they're not sure of, they can contact either the Senior Manager of Pupil Support. So there's 4 of those, 1 for each locality, that schools can ask for advice and support in terms of planning, as well as our educational psychologists. And then there's ourselves, the Quality Improvement Officers for Inclusion, that we can do the same for any ASN schools or bases that are out there. But we've got some staff with some very, very creative ideas. There's a lot of outdoor education now, a lot more than there used to be, and that recognition that we don't wait till a child gets overwhelmed in the class and becomes dysregulated and distressed, that those things are built into their programme during the day. So they maybe have something before interval. If interval is say 10:30 and an hour and a half is too long, that maybe at 10 o'clock they go out to the garden and they do something there. So we have a lot of those built in, and we're always looking to build up a resource bank of strategies and advice for schools on those sort of issues.
Thanks very much. Janine, would you like to come back in?
Really comprehensive answer. I'm so grateful for that, and to hear about all the work that's going on. And as I say, in my own experience as a Calderwood parent, I can't praise the staff enough, and I've recognised an awful lot of what you're telling me from my experience as a parent there, which I didn't declare as an interest. I don't know if I had to, but I'm sure we've all got we all use the council services from time to time. But yeah, thanks very much for that. It's very reassuring.
Thank you. Yeah, just to echo what you're saying there, really, I think to me it seems kind of obvious that there must be a huge challenge for teachers to actually provide individual tailored support to every pupil, given the range of protected characteristics. And I think, we're all learning about these much more now than even a few years ago. The awareness wasn't there. And it is really reassuring for me anyway to be able to hear that that you allow that creativity, that we encourage the teaching staff to do what they do best, which is looking after the welfare of the children and young people in their care. And I'm very glad that those resources are going to be shared, that there's any suggestions for ways that can maybe meet the needs of somebody who presents with a set of with an experience with a set of conditions that maybe that the teacher hasn't dealt with before, or the school hasn't had much experience in before. So I can only imagine that would be really useful for them. So thank you very much for that. I don't see any further questions. So with that, I'll ask the committee to move to agree to note the report. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the implementation of British Sign Language across education resources, pages 19 through 24 of your packs. And again, I'm going to invite Karen Riley, who's very busy today, to speak to it.
Thank you. So the report highlights the work that is ongoing within Hamilton School for the Deaf and Calderside Academy, so at secondary level. So those are our provisions for deaf and hearing impaired young people. As you can see, British Sign Language is well embedded within both those establishments. They all have staff who are qualified, and in many cases are qualified up to level 6, which is the highest level of qualification that you can have. They can teach most of the curriculum, therefore, can be delivered through the medium of British Sign Language for our pupils. And that service also is available for parents and school meetings, etc. And they're always looking to expand on that service as well. So in Calderside Academy, for example, they're looking at their school policies and how can they be adapted and presented in BSL format. Both schools have a strong emphasis on linking with, so Hamilton School for the Deaf shares a campus with Glenlee Primary School, and you'll note from the report that BSL is taught across both campuses, so not just in Hamilton School for the Deaf, but in the mainstream primary, the teachers will teach about a BSL to their pupils, so their pupils can communicate with the deaf pupils from Hamilton School for the Deaf, and they're not isolated, and they do joint events, joint assemblies and they do a joint community event at Christmas, Christmas signing event, where pupils from Hamilton School for the Deaf and their companions from Glenlee Primary School will be out in the community together. Calderside Academy are doing a similar thing, where they have offered BSL not just to the pupils within the deaf education unit, but they have lunchtime clubs where pupils can come along and learn it. They had an inset within their senior phase programme, and they particularly target young people who are interested in a career in medicine or social care, so they've got the ability to communicate with the clients who would use those services. They are looking at now expanding that and to create a little block of time from S1 to S3 pupils, so that the majority of pupils in the school would have some input on British Sign Language as well. Going beyond, so we have it very well embedded within those two schools, and their practice is very good and the level of qualification they have is good. What we were asked to do was to look at, could we extend the teaching of British Sign Language within the council? So we purchased the resource from Highland Council. So Highland Council have done a lot of work on this, and they really promote it to schools, primary schools, to use it as part of the what's called the 1+2 language programme, just in terms of giving children a variety of different languages to learn. So we've purchased that pack, and it enables teachers to teach BSL without the need for a specialised tutor, just so that lots of pupils can have a grounding in the basics of it and be able to communicate. And we have promoted that to our schools. We discussed it at the most recent learning community meetings. It's been in our newsletter, and within a week we had a number of primary schools who came back straight away saying, we would be really interested in this. We think it's a great skill for our pupils, and we want to take it forward. So the main task for us next year is to ensure that we are kind of moving beyond the provision for pupils, the deaf education provisions, and looking at how do we make sure that more of our pupils and more of our staff have access to BSL and are able to communicate to some extent within it.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to ask any members of the forum, I keep referring to it as a committee, but if you'd like to speak, let us know about it now. First, can I go to Councillor Grant Ferguson?
Oh, thank you, Chair. So there's an estimated 6,000 deaf BSL users here in Scotland who depend on the interpreting services, and having only between 50 to 60 qualified BSL interpreters in Scotland, I think this equates to approximately one interpreter for every 109 deaf BSL users. So booking an interpreter in advance isn't always feasible. BSL users experience issues with, for example, bank accounts. They need emergency appointments with dentists, GPs, lawyers, funeral services, and they might be invited, for example, to work-related online meetings at really short notice. Now, if an interpreter isn't available, then that means that BSL user can't attend those meetings, and then they'll need to have to reschedule, or in short notice meetings, they might have to face exclusion. So that's the reality for deaf BSL users due to the shortage of professional BSL interpreters here in Scotland. So increasing the number of deaf BSL tutors and subsequently BSL interpreters, that can change the lives of the deaf BSL users. And introducing BSL language into education by ensuring it's included in the language curriculum, that itself will cultivate future BSL interpreters and help fill this huge gap in availability. I mean, it will also provide another positive destination for some of our young students. Now, for me personally, through daily life, I've occasionally had hearing people have come up to me and said to me that they wished they could learn sign language, and I'm seeing that becoming a more and more regular occurrence with, I think, people advising that, listen, I would really like to really learn sign language. Where can they seek tuition or advising? Tell me that they're actually taking classes. The young citizens are the most curious and the most eager to learn. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the officers for committing to this, what I say is a crucial initiative. I think it's an initiative which will, as it progresses, change the lives of FBSL citizens of all ages and give students an opportunity to learn BSL and, I would say, potentially provide the foundations for a career as a sign language interpreter or even tutor. So this in itself will then allow South Lanarkshire to effectively grow their own sign language interpreters. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's a really important set of points you make there. I can only imagine how frustrating it must be to go through life and feel excluded so often. And I've heard stories of people who have had to receive some terrible news in hospital environments and the like, and they do it through the doctor having to speak to a family member who has to translate it for them. And that it must be absolutely horrific that's sadly the case for so many people. And I think, as you say, Grant, that if there's anything we can do to improve the number of translators available in the general population in years to come, then fantastic. And I'm also conscious as well that that the point in there about a 6-week block being available for all S1 and 2 pupils will hopefully achieve that. So, yeah, do you want to come back in, Grant?
No, nothing at all. No, thank you. I just wanted to thank, as I say, the officer's name's not come up there, so I just want to thank the officer for the report. So I'm happy with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was Karen Riley. So apologies again for it not appearing on screen. And indeed for yourself appearing as Bruce Cameron, who's the very eloquent and able translator, but certainly not yourself. Equally eloquent, but the Councillor Grant Ferguson, for anyone watching who's not aware of that through the name on the screen. Thank you. I'm going to, we've got another request to speak here, so off you go. Sorry.
That's okay. So for those dialing in, I'm Jill Batty. I'm the Council's Employee Development and Diversity Manager. I just wanted to mention in the context of British Sign Language that as well as preparing young people for a potential future career in sign language interpretation, or just generally understanding the communication needs of that group, we've offered some development opportunities to employees. Both North and South Lanarkshire College offer Introduction to British Sign Language, and that course was the one which filled up the most quickly, I was pleased to see. And the other thing is that we're currently offering introductory classes to counsellors. I think there's been 3 so far, and we will be offering more of those in the near future. So a lot of complementary activity on this particular subject, but probably something which will be a longer term impact and outcome, I think.
Thanks very much for that, Jill. I confess I'm not amongst those 3, and that's to my great shame, because I do want to do that course. So I'm glad you've reminded me, because I will be signing up for it later today. So thank you. Councillor Ferguson, do you want to come back in?
It was just, I think my name has appeared there, but no, it's fine. No, thank you very much for, thanks, Jill, for that interesting fact with the numbers of people interested in taking up the course. So that's, hope it continues. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. Cheers. With that, I've no further requests to speak, and so I'll ask the forum to note the report. Thank you very much, Ross. For the benefit of anyone who's dialing in, the joke there is that unusually Ross is having to help the chair out here. So it's much appreciated as the only voice in the room. So thank you to him for that. I have no urgent business, so I'm about to bring the meeting to a close. But just before I do, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank someone who isn't here but frequently has been in the past. She is, of course, Kay McVeigh, who, as we all know from the last full council meeting, is sadly leaving us, not so sadly for herself. She is off to, I was going to say sunnier climes, but it'd be hard to find sunnier climes. Probably more reliably sunny climes. And she has been absolutely fantastic through many years of dedicated service to the council. And if she ever does actually hear of this or come back and watch this final meeting of the forum before she goes, I don't know why she would, where she's currently is, but if she does, I hope she'll know that the whole of the forum, all of the elected members, are really grateful to her for her advice and her answers over the years. And it's probably worth as well, given that I've been a bit of a thorn in her side for 5 years, to just put on record my apologies to her and to express my thanks, which I know she always took it with good grace and was very understanding of the stupidity and absurdity of many of the points that I made. So it was greatly appreciated, as I said to her recently. With that, I'm just going to bring the meeting to a close. So thank you all.